Communist Party promises no mercy for Xinjiang. Hong Kong elections shock just about everybody. And this Chinese mobile app could be a threat to America's national security. Welcome to China Uncensored, I'm Chris Chappell. The New York Times has published 400 pages of leaked internal documents about the crackdown on ethnic minorities in Xinjiang. Over 1 million people in Xinjiang, mostly ethnic Uyghurs, are in what are essentially concentration camps. In an internal speech, which these documents reveal, Chinese leader Xi Jinping called for an all-out struggle against terrorism, infiltration, and separatism using the organs of dictatorship and showing absolutely no mercy. Yeah, Xi loves to whip out his organ of dictatorship. That's the kind of thing you won't hear on Panda Uncensored. Not only that, but documents instruct Chinese police to tell children of detained Uyghurs that if they speak out, their parents will be kept even longer in those concentration camps. I mean, training centers. Obviously, the Chinese Communist Party was not too pleased about the leak. Xinjiang authorities said, America's New York Times has again fabricated and concocted fake news about Xinjiang. This is nothing more than getting up to its old tricks and is completely unworthy of refutation. Which is a great line because they can't refute it. China is gearing up for America's 2020 presidential elections. They're practicing by interfering in Taiwan's 2020 presidential elections.
China intervening in our elections is not something that happens on 1 or 2 days. That's very clear. This is more or less the consensus of Taiwan's people. China is using various means to intervene in Taiwan's election to damage our democracy.
Taiwan's elections are in January, and the Chinese Communist Party wants to make sure someone friendly to Beijing gets elected in Taiwan next year. Just like it would like to make sure someone friendly to Beijing gets elected in the US next year. So the party's just getting a little practice in ahead of time. Last week, the US conducted a freedom of navigation operation by sailing a warship through the Taiwan Strait. And I made a joke about it. The US has sailed another warship through the Strait of Taiwan, which is honestly kind of a mixed signal. Yeah, it shows that the US is ready to defend their ally, but it also means that if the US can sail a warship through the Taiwan Strait, China can too. Well, obviously, China's military does not understand jokes. A few days later, they did sail their own warship through the Taiwan Strait. This is exactly the kind of situation that could spiral out of control. But don't worry, I know just what to say. Hey, Chinese military, wouldn't it be funny if you didn't try to invade Taiwan? That would show 'em. This month marks 15 years since the publication of the book the Chinese Communist Party hates more than anything, the 9 commentaries on the Chinese Communist Party. It basically lays out all the dirty secrets of the party's rise to power and the bloody grip it's kept on China for the past 70 years. The book was immediately banned and then sparked a movement where millions of people inside China have publicly severed their ties to the Communist Party. It's a fun read. I provided a link below to the English translation. Phase 1 trade deal between the US and China is looking pretty elusive right now. But apparently, that doesn't bother President Trump.
Look, China's going to have to make a deal that I like. If they don't, that's it. If we don't make a deal with China, I'll just raise the tariffs even higher. Thank you very much.
And Elvis has left the building. Of course, the changes Trump wants, no more theft of American technology, no more currency manipulation, etc. The Communist Party is never going to agree to those. I mean, if you're a communist regime, you lie and cheat. It's what you do. That's why some people have said the US should completely decouple the US and Chinese economies. A lot of people already see that as inevitable. But the Trump administration has publicly said that they do not want to decouple the US and Chinese economies. Not that Trump would ever change his mind or anything. Another case of the Bubonic Plague has been reported in China. This is only the 3rd official case. A hunter got it from eating a wild rabbit, but people are concerned the problem could be much larger, since China has a history covering up epidemic outbreaks. I mean, if you can't stop the disease, At least you can stop all that media coverage. Australia is ending a multi-million-dollar human rights partnership with China. My first thought was, Australia had a human rights partnership with China? But China sits on the UN's Human Rights Council, so I'll just say at least Australia wised up. I hope Germany will do the same and stop aiding the Chinese military. That's another one of those things you think wouldn't be happening, but yes, it turns out there's a lot of stupidity out there. A spokesman for Germany's defense ministry said, "Our goal is to share our democratic values with citizens of other countries by training Chinese soldiers." I really don't see how that works. But at least it's better than Greece. China has been making big inroads in Greece. Earlier this month, Greek police detained Falun Gong practitioners while Chinese leader Xi Jinping was in town. Now, to be clear, they were not protesting. They were just meditating in a park because that's what Falun Gong practitioners do. I mean, Greece is a free country, except when Xi Jinping is in town. The United States is withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement. And now people are like, oh, China's going to be a world climate change leader. And they're right. China is a world leader in climate change. Not the good kind. The kind that's leading the world in CO2 emissions. Yes, China is #1. But just to make sure no one else catches up, China is ramping up coal usage even more. In fact, China's new coal power plants are equal to the entire capacity of the EU. Now that sounds bad, but wait, I heard that China has saved hundreds of thousands of lives by reducing air pollution. How does that make any sense? Well, what the CNN headline neglects to mention is that study was done by Chinese scientists. Awesome. And stay tuned because after the break, there's some big news from Hong Kong. Welcome back to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Hong Kong has been engulfed in protests for nearly 6 months now. People are upset at the Chinese Communist Party for interfering in their city and encroaching on their freedoms. They're also upset about the police tear gassing people and beating them up and spraying them with water cannons and arresting them. Did I mention the tear gassing? More recently, some of the protesters have reacted by throwing Molotov cocktails and setting fires to keep the police from doing all of those things. Pro-Beijing officials make up the majority of Hong Kong's government, and for months they've been demanding that protesters follow the rule of law. And so, on Sunday, Hong Kongers did follow the rule of law by voting out hundreds of pro-Beijing officials. Sunday was Hong Kong's district council elections. Now, these are small local elections which don't usually get that many votes. But this year, Hong Kong saw an unprecedented voter turnout of 71%. It's the largest voter turnout in any Hong Kong election ever. Voters lined up around the block at polling stations. Wow, nobody gets this excited about local elections, except Leslie Knope. And even more shocking, pan-Democrat candidates who support the protest movement won 85% of district council seats. For comparison, in the 2015 district council election, it broke down like this, with pan-Dems winning only 126 seats. This year, they won 385 seats. That makes them the majority in 17 out of 18 district councils in Hong Kong. And Hong Kongers were out on the streets celebrating, including this nice lady who was pouring champagne for the crowd. You know what Dom Perignon tastes like in a paper cup? It tastes like victory. For months, pro-Beijing newspapers in Hong Kong and China had claimed that most Hong Kongers supported the police cracking down on protesters, and that those people are representing the silent majority. And for months, Chinese state-run media had called for Hong Kong's silent majority to not stay silent. Well, they were half right. The silent majority didn't stay silent. They were just wrong about what the silent majority had to say. Now, these newly elected Hong Kong District Council members won't get to decide a lot of big picture things in Hong Kong. They mainly handle local things, like where to put traffic lights and garbage cans. Next year's elections for the Legislative Council will be more meaningful, since those legislators get to pass laws. But these local district councils do get to choose about 10% of the representatives who vote for the next Hong Kong chief executive, even though that system is rigged, so it can ultimately be controlled by Beijing. Nonetheless, Sunday's district council election results are huge. They're indisputable proof that the majority of Hong Kong voters are unhappy with how the government and police have been handling the protests. And Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam understands that voters are upset with the government.
We were aware of the large number of voters coming out to cast a vote, perhaps not only to select a preferred candidate to sit on the district council, but also to express a view on many issues in society, including, I would readily accept that, including deficiencies in governance, including unhappiness with the time taken to deal with the current unstable environment.
No, they're not unhappy that you haven't dealt with the protesters. They're unhappy that your government has refused to listen to the protesters and instead allowed the police to do the whole thing with the tear gas and the beatings and the water cannons and the arrests and the tear gas. The people are unhappy with you, Carrie Lam. Even a lot of the pro-establishment politicians don't like you either, because your handling of the extradition bill was what led to 6 months of protests and their stunning defeat at the polls. Anyway, the election results were not just a shock to tone-deaf Carrie Lam. They were also a shock to tone-deaf Communist Party officials in Beijing. According to foreign policy editor James Palmer, Beijing genuinely thought they were going to win big in the elections, to the point of having pre-written the stories. That's embarrassing. The Global Times adjusted their coverage to accuse Hong Kong protesters of having a political agenda. I mean, that's true. Their political agenda was to use the democratic process to win seats in the government. That's what elections are for. Meanwhile, state-run China Daily created this handy infographic to show how the protesters stopped people from voting, which is funny because Sunday actually had the highest voter turnout in Hong Kong history. Might want to rethink that one, China Daily. Hong Kong-based author of City on Fire, Anthony Daperin, writes that Beijing appears to have been genuinely surprised by this result, and Beijing does not like to be surprised by anything that happens within its borders. Which is why Beijing is no fun at birthday parties. Surprise! So will China's communist leaders look at these district council election results and engage in genuine self-reflection? Not a chance. As Daperin writes, this election result will not be seen by Beijing as a sign that they need to change tact in their approach to Hong Kong. It will not be the catalyst for some grand compromise. It will be seen as a sign that the Hong Kong people are making the wrong choice and action needs to be taken to correct them. Fortunately, Beijing has ways to help correct people's wrong thinking. They want to introduce patriotic education in Hong Kong schools and a national security law to further restrict Hong Kongers' freedom. And if those don't work, there's always simply telling the police to crack down harder. I mean, if savagely beating people doesn't make them like you, I don't know what will. And after this short break, we'll look at a Chinese-owned mobile app that's sweeping the country of America. And now the US government is asking whether it's a risk to national security. Welcome back to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. This episode has been sponsored by Surfshark. Protect your privacy online. Now, my team of high-powered market researchers has told me I need to make China Uncensored more appealing to Generation Z. And that's why I joined the TikTok.
It's just TikTok.
Fine. TikTok. TikTok has 500 million active users worldwide, including pretty much everyone under 25. It's fire.
Weird flex, but okay.
Who are you? How did you even get in here?
Okay, boomer.
Look, I get that TikTok is the coolest new app, or littest, or most Gucci fam. I hate myself right now. But the biggest problem, other than my own looming mortality, is that TikTok is owned by a Chinese company. Back in 2017, a Chinese company called ByteDance bought the social media app Musical.ly for close to $1 billion. Musical.ly was based in Shanghai, but most users were in the US, where it caught on with American teens. Then they merged Musical.ly's user base into TikTok, and that allowed them to slide TikTok into the US market. Now you might think, so what if TikTok is owned by a Chinese company? Well, if you're worried about FBI man watching you, you should be way more concerned about MSS man watching you. MSS is China's Ministry of State Security. They're seriously scary dudes, or whatever Zoomers call dudes these days. And China has very different laws about data privacy. Namely, in China, there's no privacy. Chinese law says Chinese companies that collect user data have to share that data with the Chinese government upon request. It's not that Chinese authorities actively monitor every user's data in real time, but the reality is that if and when Beijing makes a demand, it's hard for Chinese-based companies to say no. And that's why it might be concerning that a Chinese company, ByteDance, owns TikTok, since TikTok collects so much user data. That data includes your username, what you like, where you are in the world, what's being recorded by your camera and microphone, etc. And it's not just me speculating about security risks. The US government has just opened a national security investigation into TikTok. The investigation is led by CFIUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. CFIUS is an interdepartmental group of federal government agencies. It investigates and sometimes blocks deals by foreign companies that might pose a risk to US national security. For example, last year, CFIUS blocked Chinese-owned Ant Financial from buying financial services company MoneyGram. CFIUS also blocked IDG Energy Investment from buying a bunch of oil and gas assets in Texas. And now, CFIUS is forcing a Chinese company to sell Grindr, a gay dating app. Chinese gaming company Kunlun Tech had purchased Grindr last year without going through a CFIUS review. CFIUS didn't disclose specifically why the Chinese buyout of Grindr was a national security concern, but I can just imagine what would happen if the Chinese intelligence service knew private information about Americans, like who's gay, who's HIV positive, and had access to the pics that may occasionally get sent by men using the Grindr app. Imagine all the blackmail opportunities. Anyway, back to TikTok. Earlier this year, there were also some concerns about TikTok's censorship. It came after The Guardian got its hands on TikTok's content moderation policy. It showed TikTok had been censoring content that was embarrassing to the Chinese regime. For example, there were reports that videos about the Hong Kong protests were either blocked completely or quietly labeled as visible to self so other users couldn't see them. And this applied to the American app TikTok, not the Chinese version, which goes by a different name. But it seems that since May this year, TikTok has changed its policies to distance itself from Beijing. TikTok now claims that it does not censor content, while also not specifically admitting that they ever did. In an official statement, TikTok said their data centers are located entirely outside of China, and none of their data is subject to Chinese law. They also said they have never been asked by the Chinese government to remove any content, and they would not do so if asked. Which is funny, because ByteDance, the company that owns TikTok, is completely governed by Chinese law. That means the Chinese government could, in theory, require ByteDance to require TikTok to give up user information, which means TikTok would give it to ByteDance, which would give it to the Chinese government. But I see no reason why the US government should ban a Chinese-owned social media app, even though the Chinese government bans pretty much all American social media apps, like Twitter and Facebook. But still, CFIUS is investigating TikTok as a potential national security risk. CFIUS just won't reveal why, since they do not comment on information relating to specific cases. There are a few things that could happen after this review process. CFIUS could decide TikTok is a risk and ban it outright. That's unlikely. CFIUS could decide that TikTok's owner, ByteDance, needs to sell off TikTok to an American company. That's what happened with Grindr, although the difference is that TikTok wasn't an American company to begin with. Or CFIUS could decide there is no problem. And then TikTok would be free to do whatever TikTok does, because frankly, I still don't get the appeal. What are you still doing here? Anyway, this episode has been sponsored by Surfshark. You should be using a VPN whenever you go online. I mean, you don't want Chinese companies monitoring what you do on the internet, do you? Surfshark can also help prevent hackers, the US government, or your internet service provider from learning who or where you are. And if you want to post subversive videos to TikTok in a country that won't let you, you can use Surfshark's No Borders mode to get around it. Plus, with Surfshark, you can connect as many devices as you want. Try it out with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Plus, Surfshark has a special discount for China Uncensored fans for Black Friday. Go to surfshark.com/uncensored and use the code UNCENSORED to get 83% off a 2-year plan and 3 additional months free. Protect yourself online. Click the link below. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.